Well, good morning, everyone. It's good to be back again. I see some familiar faces, and I think the last time I was here was in, I want to say 17. Does that sound right? Something like that? What? Probably more than that. Yeah. Yeah, you still had kids at home. Yeah. They say confession is good for the soul. My folks are in their 90s and they live in Louisville, and so I came to Louisville actually on Friday and stayed as long as I could yesterday with them, left after supper, drove to Columbus, and had planned, I got into Columbus about 9 o'clock last night, and planned on getting a really good night's sleep, and I made a mistake. I turned on that Alabama-Texas A&M ball game, because I thought, well, it's going to be a slaughter, and, I'll just see what the score is and turn it back off. And I ended up watching that whole thing. And my son-in-law went to Texas A&M, so I was kind of happy for him. And so turned that thing off, and then, okay, now I'm going to go to sleep. You ever try to go to sleep and you can't go to sleep because you tell yourself I'm going to sleep? And so I laid there till about 12:30 or 1 o'clock, finally fell asleep. Well, my body's still on Central Time. We live in Nashville, and my body's on Central Time. And so I never set an alarm because I just tell myself, wake up at a certain time, and I usually pretty close. And I woke up, thought, man, I'm feeling good. And I rolled over and I looked at the clock. It said 5 after 8. 5 after 8. I meant to leave at 8. So I jump up, grab my stuff, throw it in the car, run into the restaurant there in the hotel or in the little place, and I got to have something to eat. And so I got scrambled eggs on a plate and a fork. You ever drive through Columbus eating scrambled eggs on a plate? First of all, you're dodging road construction, and you're eating scrambled eggs on a plate. And I thought, this isn't working out too well, but I made it, and thankful for the invite. It's just so good to be with all of you, and love this time of year here in this part of the country, and love all of you all. Look forward to getting acquainted even more this week, and renewing acquaintances, and even meeting some new people. And I'm just thankful for the invite, thankful that you've had me come and be with you this week. Turning your Bibles to Exodus in the Old Testament. I'm going to go back to Exodus chapter 3. Exodus chapter 3. It's one of those sections that we read when we were kids, going to Bible class and vacation Bible school and all that kind of thing. And we learned the story of Exodus chapter 3, but we get adults and we kind of get away from this. But let's go back and look at it again. Exodus 3, beginning in verse 1. We'll read a few verses. Now Moses was pasturing the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the west side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. The angel of the Lord appeared to him in a blazing fire from the midst of a bush. And he looked, and behold, the bush was burning with fire, yet the bush was not consumed. So Moses said, I must turn aside and see this marvelous sight. Why the bush is not burned up? When the Lord saw that he turned aside to look, God called to him from the midst of the bush and said, Moses, Moses. And he said, here I am. And then he said, do not come near here. Remove your sandals from your feet, for the place on which you stand is holy ground. And he said also, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. And then Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. The Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt, and have given heed to their cry because of their taskmasters, for I am aware of their sufferings. So I have come down to deliver them from the power of the Egyptians and bring them up to the land that is good and spacious and flowing with milk and honey. Skip down to verse 10. Now, therefore come, and I will send you to Pharaoh, so that you may bring my people, the sons of Israel, out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, who am I, that I should go to Pharaoh, and that I should bring the sons of Israel out of Egypt? And he said, certainly I will be with you. Verse 13, then Moses said to God, behold, I'm going to the sons of Israel, and I will say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you. Now, they may say to me, what is his name? What shall I say to them? And God said to Moses, I am who I am. And he says, thus you shall say to the sons of Israel, I am has sent me to you. One of the saddest things I think to see are people who are bored. It's not that we don't have anything to do. We have plenty to do. In fact, two people get together and they have a conversation, and you don't have to go but a minute, and in the course of the conversation, somebody will say, oh, I'm busy. Never been busier in my life. So boredom is not defined by a lack of busyness. That's not what boredom is. Boredom is defined by a lack of mission, by a lack of purpose. You can have lots to do and still be bored. I think that's one of the reasons the gaming industry, the video gaming industry is so big. And people get addicted to all of that. And yet when you play these games of any kind, they do give us a goal. They do give us a mission. It's a mini mission, M-I-N-I mission. But it's a mission nonetheless. And so I can play a game and I can become a race car driver. I can become an assassin. I can become a fighter pilot. I can become an angry bird, I can become anything I want. There's no threat to my well-being. There's no real adventure. I'm not at risk for anything. It's just purely entertainment. Entertainment. I want to take some of you back. Some of you can't go back this far, and I can't go back quite this far. But in 1951, an author by the name of Ray Bradbury wrote a book called Fahrenheit 451. Does anybody remember that book? Did anybody other than me have to read that book in high school? Fahrenheit 451. And in the book, Fahrenheit 451, the writer projects way into the future. And he writes about this futuristic society that becomes obsessed with entertainment. And in Fahrenheit 451, he describes this crazy thing that people we live in houses and our TVs are the size of the wall. And in Fahrenheit 451, the firemen don't go around putting out fires, they start them. And they start them by burning books, because everybody knows books are dangerous, and books have ideas, and books challenge people to think for themselves. And so that's the idea, Fahrenheit 451. But in Fahrenheit 451, here's this futuristic, entertainment-obsessed society, and yet nobody's happy. Something is about to destroy their lives, but they don't look up from their entertainment long enough to even notice. Now, you fast forward from 1951, you fast forward 70 years. And we have televisions the size of our walls. And we binge on entertainment. And we carry movies and we carry music in our pockets. And there's not a second go by that I don't have to be entertained. If I want to be entertained, it's right there all the time. And so we are obsessed with entertainment, and yet we're bored. How can that be? If you are bored with life, then there's something you need that no Netflix binging is going to fix. No video game is going to solve it. No addictive app on your phone is going to fix it either. What you need is mission. What you need is purpose. Real mission and real purpose. Something to pour your life in that is bigger than you are. Something you can't grasp the magnitude of, but you know that it is huge. Something about which you're not simply observing something on a screen. You are an active participant. And it's not a game. What I'm saying is, God created you on purpose. There's not another you like you in all the world. Never will be, never has been. God has created you on purpose, but God has also created you for purpose. But before you can find your purpose, there's something you've got to see. There's someone you have to see. And you have to see that this one who created you and who made this world for you to live in is not boring. And so the great I am in this passage in Exodus, the great I am reveals himself to Moses as the God of the fire. So I want to take this passage in Exodus chapter 3 with these thoughts in mind and unpack some things here and apply these things to your life and to mine. So if you're taking notes this morning, I'm going to give you three things. I'm going to give you three ways that God is like fire. Three ways that God is like fire. And I want you to think about these things. Let's see if there's any application here to this passage in Exodus that we all know real well. Number one, like fire is both dangerous and attractive, so is the holiness of God. Let me say that again. Like fire is both dangerous and attractive, so is the holiness of God. When you see fire, you're drawn to it. It's like a magnet. You're drawn to it. Fire has a way of pulling you in. And yet you understand that if you get too close to it, you're going to get burned. So fire is both attractive and dangerous all at the same time. Like God. Now here's Moses. Moses is an octogenarian. He's 80 years old. He's still working. He's still busy. But he's bored. He's a sheep herder. It's not like Moses didn't have anything to do. He had a job. He had a responsibility. And yet sheep herding was not exactly an 8 to 5, 5-day a week, clock in, clock out kind of job. So Moses has got plenty to do. He doesn't lack for anything to do. What Moses lacked is what a lot of us lack. Mission. Look in verse 2 of the passage we just read. Exodus 3, verse 2. The angel of the Lord appeared to him in a blazing fire from the midst of a bush, and he looked, and behold, the bush was burning with fire, and yet the bush was not consumed. Fire caught Moses' eye like fire catches ours. And he looks at this bush that's on fire. But there was something odd about that. And so he turns aside to investigate in verse 4. When the Lord saw that he turned aside, God called to him from the midst of the bush and said, Moses, Moses. And he said, here I am. And then he said in verse 5, do not come near here. Moses sees the fire and he starts walking closer to it, and the voice says, stop. Don't come any closer. Stop right there. Don't come any closer. Remove your sandals from your feet, for the place on which you stand is holy ground. We have a hard time, I think, with that word holy. Because when we think holy, our mind usually goes to pretentious. We think somebody, we all know what it means when somebody says, oh, they think they're holier than thou. Well, we know what that means. But that's not what this holy is. God is different holy. God is other holy. God is set apart holy, which is what holy really means, to be set apart. So rather than holier than thou, God is holy art thou. And it's the fire of God's holiness that makes him both attractive and dangerous all at the same time. What happens when you take something and throw it into the fire? What happens to it? Well, it gets burned. The fire burns it. The fire melts it. The fire consumes it. Whatever you cast into the fire is turned to ashes. And Moses turns to come closer to the fire, and the voice says, "Stop, don't come any closer." Because the combination of God's holy fire and your unholy sin will kill you. And so God says, "Stop." How many of you have been to the Grand Canyon? Anybody? Anybody been to the Grand Canyon? Okay. Nobody goes to the Grand Canyon to stay as far away from it as you possibly can. You drive all the way across country and you go to the Grand Canyon, and you go to the Grand Canyon to get as close to it as you can. But the closer you get to the Grand Canyon, the more you realize, hey, this is kind of a dangerous place. You know, parents take their kids or grandkids or whatever, and we go to the Grand Canyon and we think, oh, it's safe. You know, they're going to have walls and fences and guardrails and all that kind of thing. They don't have any of that. It's a cliff. If you go too far, you're going to fall off. They have signs that say, don't go past this point. And the closer, if you watch parents and grandparents, the closer that they get with their kids, they start grabbing their kids, you know, holding their hands. Because as you get closer, you begin to realize this is a pretty dangerous place. The beauty of the Grand Canyon draws you in. But the closer you get, the more you respect it. Nobody goes to the Grand Canyon and takes a running, flying leap off of the edge and yells, "Cannonball!" Nobody does that. Why? Well, because there's a word for the person that does that. It's dead. You're dead. I mean, nobody cannonballs off the Grand Canyon into the Colorado River. It doesn't happen, okay? You respect it. And that's the same with God. Staring at the fire, Moses is mesmerized. But God says, stop. Don't go past this point. Because what is beautiful is also deadly. That's why that there can be no such thing as a bored Christian. How can that be? Because we serve a God, the great I Am, who is both attractive and dangerous all at the same time. So attractive and dangerous is that He is not boring. If God is boring, then you have never come face to face with the fire of His holiness. And one of the reasons why that happens sometimes is because we're too busy being entertained. We're too busy being entertained to focus on the God who is responsible for our being here and responsible for the world in which we live. The problem is, when you lose a sense of who God is, you lose a sense of who you are. And when you lose a sense of who you are, then what happens? Every time we start remaking God in our image. And if you notice, when we remake God into our image, the God we want, then God gets smaller and smaller and smaller, and we get bigger and bigger and bigger. And then one day we wake up and we get all perturbed because God's not running the world the way I think it ought to be run. What's wrong? We've made our God too small. We've made ourselves too big. And so rather than being grateful for what we have, we become entitled. Because we start thinking it's all about me. You know, next time you go to the Grand Canyon, or when you go to the Grand Canyon, I want you to conduct an experiment. I want you to try this. Go to the edge of the Grand Canyon where all these people are lined up and they're oohing and aahing and all that. Go to the edge of the Grand Canyon and then get out in front of those people where you turn around and you're staring at them and turn around in front of all of those people and say, hey, everybody, look how awesome I am. They're going to look at you like you're an idiot. Because nobody goes to the Grand Canyon to see you. We go to the Grand Canyon to see the Grand Canyon. And we understand that it's not about us. It's not about us. It's about Him. It's about His glory. You ever go to the zoo? Doesn't Columbus have a zoo? A really good zoo. Yeah. Yeah. I was in a meeting in Columbus. Where was that church? I don't remember. Name one. Laurel Canyon. That's it. I was at Laurel Canyon in a meeting, and they had a potluck on Sunday, and after church, and so, you know, this little boy, I don't know how old the little boy was. I want to say he's maybe 7 or 8. This little boy attached himself to me, and he says, I'll go through the line with you so you'll know what to get. Because some food's good and some isn't. And I said, okay. So we go through the line. On my plate, I ended up with 2 pieces of pizza. And I don't remember what else, but it wasn't anything I really wanted. But I let him pick. Okay. Because I'd look at something and go, boy, that looks really good. And he'd go, that's not any good. Okay. So but anyway, he wanted to sit down and eat with me. And so we did. We had our pizza together. And he started telling, he said, you got to go to the zoo. You got to go to the zoo. And he was telling me all about the things in the Columbus Zoo and all that kind of deal. Now, nobody goes to the zoo to see the dachshund exhibit. Do they? Nobody goes up to the zookeeper at the Columbus Zoo and go, where do you keep the dachshunds? Where's the dachshund exhibit? You know, the little wiener dogs? Nobody goes to the zoo to see the dachshund exhibit. We go to the zoo to see lions and tigers and bears. Why? Because lions and tigers and bears will rip your face off. That's why. And we want to get close to them, but not too close. Because what is attractive is also dangerous. Which begets the question, why did you come today? I think a lot of people come to an assembly on a Sunday. I think they're here to see the dachshund exhibit. I don't think they understand how big and awesome our God is. Because we worship the attractive, holy God. The one who made the sun so bright. Well, you go out and try to look at it. You can't. What is so attractive is also dangerous. And it is this God who seeks to light a fire in you. We sing about that sometimes. Light the fire in my heart today. All right? Secondly, like fire is intimate. Like fire is intimate, so is the love of God. Like fire is intimate, so is the love of God. You ever build a campfire? You ever sit around a campfire? A campfire just naturally says, come on in. I mean, it draws us in. There's a sense of coziness. There's a sense of warmth and intimacy about a campfire. I think friends and I think s'mores. When we adopted the 3 kids, 3 teenagers a few years ago, and they were trying to learn English. When they got off the plane, they didn't know any English. And that was, the English language is not easy. It's not easy. And we have little sayings that make absolutely no sense to people who don't know English. I'm standing next to Alex one day at a restaurant. They got the board, fast food, they got the board up there. And he's looking and looking and looking, and the guy says, come on, man. And Alex says, why? I'm already here. That makes no sense, And I would tell the kids, we're gonna build a fire in the fire pit tonight. We're going to have s'mores. And they said, s'more or what? They didn't understand. But I tell you what, the first time they had one, they wanted to have a second one. They caught on to Americanism really quick, But the same fire that draws you in and is cozy and warm and saves you from the cold can kill you. But here's the problem with God. God's not going to turn down the heat of His holiness. He's not going to become less of who He is. So how's this going to work? How am I going to draw closer to Him? How's this going to happen? Well, interestingly enough, God doesn't change Himself. He doesn't become less holy so you can approach. He doesn't change Himself. He changes you. And the reason He changes you is because He loves you. So He's going to make a way for you to come to the fire without getting burned. And how's He going to do that? Look closely at verse 7 and verse 8 of Exodus 3. The Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt, and have given heed to their cry because of their taskmasters, for I'm aware of their sufferings. Now look closely at verse 8. So I have come down to deliver them. Interesting. Do you understand the ultimate God coming down would not happen for centuries later? In John chapter 1 and verse 1, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And then verse 14, and the Word, God, became flesh and dwelt among us, pitched His tent with us. And the same God who said to Moses from the burning bush, I am who I am, is used by Jesus when He said, unless you believe that I am, you will die in your sin. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but by me. So the only way I can draw near to God's holiness and not get burned is because of Him, not me. He took death for me. He was burned for me. He died on the cross for me. Why? So that I might become the righteousness of God in Him. It's not in me. It's in Him. So why would God go to all of this trouble to make a way for me to come into the presence of His holiness? Why would God do that? Well, 3:16, God so loved the world that He gave His only begotten Son. God, that's how much God loves us. I can't comprehend that. I can't comprehend the love of God. I can talk about it. I can read you Bible verses about it. But I don't really understand the depth of that kind of love. But when that happens, when the great I Am offers you forgiveness of sins and holy purifying, when that happens, then an amazing thing happens. He sets you on fire. And in a sense, as His holy people, you become the bush that doesn't burn up. Not because of you, but because of Him. Light the fire in my heart today. Let me give you one more thing. Write this down. Like fire fuels motion, so is the power of God. Like fire fuels motion, so is the power of God. Your car won't move. It won't go anywhere without power. It has to have two things. It has to have fuel and it has to have a spark. And when the fuel combines with the spark, there is what I call an explosion motion. And we understand how that works. Well, it was the same with Moses. Moses is 80 years old. Every day's the same. He's out here herding sheep. And he's just kind of going through the motions. Like you and I go through the motions sometimes. He's running on empty. And then God fills his tank and lights the fire. And when that happened, there became an explosion motion. Verse 10. Come now, God says, I will send you to Pharaoh so that you may bring my people, the sons of Israel, out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and that I should bring the sons of Israel out of Egypt? He said, certainly I will be with you. Verse 16, go. Go. Now, God had to work through some things with Moses because Moses was unsure of himself. And God is, in essence, is saying to Moses, okay, I understand you're unsure of yourself, but don't be unsure of me. Go. Go. Nothing explodes until it's lit. And God lit him up. God lit him up. Because once you see the fire of God's holiness, and once you are consumed with the fire of God's love, then the fire of His purpose explodes in your heart. I love the passage in Luke chapter 24, verse 32. Here's two men walking along the road to Emmaus. And there's a stranger that joins them in the conversation. And they were oblivious as to who this stranger was. And in time, they realized this is Jesus. But Jesus was dead. He died. But now He has been raised and He walked with us. And they ran and they told their friends about meeting Jesus resurrected. And they said, as they recalled the conversation, they said, were not our hearts burning within us? Explosion motion. Remember the day of Pentecost in Acts chapter 2? Tongues as of fire came down and rested upon the apostles. And these uneducated, untrained, unlearned men began to speak fluently in the languages of all of those people present. God's fire lit them up. And they went out, and you read the book of Acts, they went out and turned the world upside down. Light the fire. Light the fire in my heart today. So what have we said? God hasn't just saved you from something, sin. He has saved you to something. And so we become His, and we become the church of God. And as the church that belongs to God, we are made holy through Him. And when we are made holy through Him, we become wholly attractive and wholly dangerous because we are supposed to be a group of people set on fire. Are we? Are we set on fire? Or are we just sort of going through the motion? If there is no fire, there's no mission. If there's no mission, there's no church. And if there's no church, the only thing left are a bunch of people that get together one day a week and they sing songs about a fire they wish they had, but they don't. God forbid that become us. We need to pray. We need to pray, God, light us up. Light us up so that we can go set the world on fire. It's not about burning books, Fahrenheit 451. It's about a book that ought to burn us, that ought to set us on fire. Because, folks, we're not here to be entertained. We're not here to keep our heads locked on a screen. That's not what life's about. We're not here to be amused. That's not it. We have a mission. Go into all of the world and make disciples of all the nations. That's explosion motion. So what have we said? 3 things, if you've written them down or memorized them. Like fire is dangerous and attractive, so is the holiness of God. Like fire is intimate, so is the love of God. Like fire fuels motion, so is the power of God. So if you're a Christian and you're bored, then you've never walked close enough to the fire of God. Light the fire in my heart today. What time am I supposed to quit?
Oh, you got another 6 minutes or so.
What do y'all want to talk about? I'm done. Thank you all very much. Enjoy this extra time to visit and just enjoy being together. I look forward to the week. And if I haven't greeted you or even met you already, I certainly want to do that. So take a few extra moments and greet one another as the Bible tells us to, and enjoy being together this morning. Okay.